Good morning. It is the morning of November
Allegedly.
6th, 2024. Brenna, we are coming off one of the more consequential evenings of our lifetimes. A major inflection point for our country. I am speaking, of course, of the college football playoff reveal from Tuesday night.
Yep, that's it.
America watched as the Oregon Ducks were revealed to be the number one team, pardon me, in the country, in the CFP rankings. No surprise, I will say. I think we all knew that was coming. We knew Georgia was going to be in the mix, Ohio State, but the Ducks had a pretty clearly number one, as we knew. It was interesting, Brenna, looking at the potential bracket. I'm here. I'm fully here.
Are you here?
Well, I was trying to pull it up. I was trying to pull up the actual bracket, but it's funny because it is so premature. Premature is the word I was looking for, because all these teams still have to play each other. Conceivably, Oregon and Ohio State have to play each other in the Big Ten championship game, assuming it's Ohio State that gets there. Ohio State and Indiana have to play each other. Indiana and Penn State have to play each other. So it is literally impossible that the bracket could look like it does, as of week one. But it's instructive from the standpoint of, one, I think it's instructive kind of as an education tool to kind of start thinking about what this playoff is actually going to look like. We've certainly seen the format and talked about it, but to me it was like really interesting, and I tweeted this last night. But the idea that just to get to a championship game against Georgia, theoretically, the Ducks would have to get through, potentially Tennessee. What was it? Tennessee and Ohio State just to get to Georgia.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, that is an absolute gauntlet. And, I just think this playoff is going to be a total grind. And maybe the Ducks are up to the task. I mean, I don't think we've seen any reason to think that they aren't, but just what a war of attrition this playoff is going to be. Were there any big takeaways from you from the first CFP ranking?
It's not a surprise, but it is always interesting for me to see the actual CFP rankings and then what the bracket looks like, because those are two different things now.
Totally.
So that's kind of funny. Like, you see the bracket and you're like, wait, BYU at number 4? And then you're like, oh, okay. Like, you understand it, but your first gut is like, why is BYU all the way up there? Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it right now. It's gonna be like you said, it's a gauntlet. I just look at this and I'm like, gosh, oh, how are teams gonna stay healthy through this? That sort of thing.
Well, exactly. And it was funny because I was talking at Michigan, and we're going to get into that game and the weekends you and I both had here in just a second. But I was talking at Michigan with somebody about Oregon and Oregon's depth, and specifically at wide receiver, because there obviously has been a scare with Tez Johnson leaving the game with an injury. And I was making the point that, Oregon has the receiver depth to withstand an injury to Tez Johnson. They have the players, because they have 3 other guys who could be number 1 receivers if Justice Lowe is really coming into form, if he's able to be as consistent as he's been the last couple of weeks. Plus, you have 2 tight ends who are great pass catchers, and Terrence Ferguson and Kenyon Sadiq. So I was like, I think they're fine on the field or from a pass catching standpoint. Yeah. And I was talking to James Crepia, our colleague, and he made the point, they've got other talent there, but over the course of a potentially 4-week playoff, you don't have the depth you think you have is just more vulnerable because of what a grind that is going to be. So I think that your point about injury and staying healthy, staying sharp, staying health doesn't mean just avoiding injury. It means avoiding the wear and tear that keeps you from being your best by the end. Yeah, at the end of January.
Yeah. And another thing that just on that same vein, like, gosh, what an advantage that bye is. You really want that bye. Getting 1 game off of your schedule is huge. So that's another thing that just, kind of in that same subject matter that just absolutely, leaps out to me when you're actually like really looking at it and looking at what this path could potentially look like. Obviously, as you said, it's not what it will end up looking like, but what it could look like. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the bye is huge because if Oregon goes and loses by 1 in the Big Ten championship game to Ohio State, you don't slip to 2 or 3. You slip out of the top 4 because you're not the conference champion. And so you lose that bye. That bye is only for conference champions. And so if you don't win the conference championship, all of a sudden, like let's say you're 6, okay? And just looking and if you're 6 in this existing bracket, you would be facing Alabama in the first round of the playoff. And Alabama has not looked great, week to week, and Oregon might beat Alabama. I would pick Oregon to beat Alabama, especially at Autzen. That game would be at home.
Who wants to see Kalen DeBoer again?
Fair enough. But I do. But when you consider what it will take just to get through Alabama, just to get to the quarterfinal, where you're not in the Rose Bowl now, you're probably going to like the Sugar Bowl or something. It's just a much tougher road. And so I think that, that was the biggest takeaway for me, was just kind of seeing it and really starting to process what this is going to look like over the final few weeks of the regular season, Big Ten championship, and then into the first time we have this playoff system.
It's going to be mighty different, in the words of Oregon.
I will say that the prospect of a home playoff game at Autzen, a few days before Christmas, December 20th, December 21st, and it being obviously a Alabama, Notre Dame, Penn State, I mean, it could be Boise State again. Those.
Boy, by the way, was everyone freaking out about that game? And now looks like Oregon did like it. That game looks better and better every week. I keep thinking about that.
It does, and I remember writing that night, even in the column I wrote, that I was like, because Oregon had problems at that point. They really, really did. And obviously the Idaho game, was not as close as the Boise game. And maybe you didn't really ever think Oregon was really going to lose. But it was just so much closer than it needed to be. And it was conceivable. Like, Idaho was a 4th down penalty away from getting the ball back within a touchdown. So it was, it was nip and tuck at that time. But I remember writing, Boise State is a really good team and might be a great team. And I think what we're seeing from Boise State is they're not just a token. They don't look just like a token playoff team that is getting in through the back door to the playoff. This is a team that looks, could be, is there on merit. And by the way, may not even end up being the 12 seed or the token, kind of like group of 5 school, because the only rule is that the top 4 highest conference champions. Well, BYU is currently the 4th highest rated conference champion, and deservingly so, by the way. BYU has been very good this year and has beaten some pretty darn good teams. And we'll have a chance to continue to burnish its resume, over the next few weeks. They go to Utah this weekend, Arizona State in 2 weeks. Arizona State's been on the cusp of the top 25. All of a sudden, good for Kenny Dillingham. So,
shout out to Cam Levitt.
Yeah, no kidding. BYU has a chance to, really nail that down. But if BYU loses and Boise State keeps winning, Boise State could conceivably be the highest ranked or the 4th highest ranked conference champion, jumping the Big 12 champion, which would give Boise State the first round bye, which is really interesting. But yes, to your point, Boise State, a very high quality win for the Ducks in week 2.
Welcome and goodbye to your Boise State corner. I gotta say, I didn't have us doing a few minutes on Boise State when we started this podcast, but I'm not upset about it. We gotta give some love to the West Coast college football teams, because let me tell you, that's it. So I'm all right with it. I'm okay with it.
Well, it's not going to be USC. It's not going to be UCLA.
Huh.
It's not going to be Stanford or Cal. It's not going to be it's not going to be Cal Poly, which got smoked by the Montana Grizzlies last weekend. So, Boise State it is.
Not going to be Sac State, who lost to Portland State.
Oof, I know. My guy Andy Thompson got to turn it around down there.
Dante Chachere went and ran all over those guys.
good for the Vikes. Good for Bruce Barnum.
Yep.
All right, Brenna, we're gonna circle back. We're gonna talk about the Ducks and Wolverines in Ann Arbor, defending champions. I was there, but first I do want to continue our discussion from last week about Christine Sinclair and the end of her remarkable run with the Thorns and beyond the Thorns. You know, one of the greatest international careers in the history of the sport, men's or women's. You were at Providence Park on Friday night for that game. Obviously, she scores a farewell goal in the win against Angel City. What was that night like, and what was Christine like in her final go at Providence?
I like, one of my biggest takeaways is I still can't believe how lucky I was to somehow get her final goal on my phone's camera. Like, I just randomly like I mean, I knew that I was like, okay, they are at an advantage coming down this field right now, but just to pull out my phone in that moment and not randomly, but educated guessingly get a goal was like such an insane special like treasure for me to like always have. And I think that's what the night was. It was just, you couldn't have written it any better. They come out, they absolutely demolish Angel City in the first half. So the second half just kind of felt like, all right, let's just get to the celebration, which was nice to be at a game where it wasn't like you were clenching your butt cheeks the whole way through it. So yeah, just, I saw that Becky Sauerbrunn said it was the most Portland night ever, and it really did feel that way. I mean, who could have ever, in soccer, it's just so like unlikely that somebody in their final game at a place, most likely, I'd give it a 3% chance that she might play there again. And that would be in the playoffs, in case anybody was wondering. The way that the playoff seeding works out, they could technically play a semifinal game there. But it seems highly unlikely. That would require Orlando. This is what happens. This is what happens when you work in a market with someone named Orlando. I now cannot pronounce Orlando correctly. So shout out to Orlando Sanchez, who has forever changed how I pronounce Orlando. It's every time I can't say it correctly now. It would require Orlando to lose in the first round to the 8th seed, and that seems incredibly unlikely considering how good Orlando has been over the past year.
Also, how good Orlando has been.
Yes, shout out to Orlando and Orlando.
I do like that this entire episode of the podcast is basically us explaining how playoffs work in different sports, because it's confusing.
It is. Well, and also the NWSL playoffs changed this year. So,
and by the way, thank God the Timbers have been eliminated, because the MLS playoffs are different yet again. So,
oh my gosh.
We've been spared from having to explain that one too.
Don't get me started on my rant about how the MLS playoffs are ridiculous. Anyways, those things go on forever. So then MLS playoffs, WHL hockey playoffs, similar in terms of how incredibly long they are. WHL playoffs absolutely blow my mind for a bunch of 16-year-old kids. Anywho, yeah, so just one of those nights that you feel really lucky and privileged to have been at. They gave out posters. I already framed my poster from the night, just because, it's something that I think I will value more and more as time goes by, getting to say that I was at that night. For Christine, I think her quote in the post-game interview saying, "I'm not dead," is kind of what sums up the night for her. In multiple ways. Like, this team isn't dead. We're going to keep going. You know, they're finally at a decent place injury-wise for the first time in a while. And I think it's only going to get better in terms of that for them. So her team's not dead, but also, you know, yeah, she's not going to be playing soccer anymore in the near future, but she has a good attitude about it all, and not being she's not an emotional person. You know, that's just not who Christine Sinclair is. She's very like ABC, which has been probably a great advantage to her in her career, playing in some highly emotional situations, because that's what sports are. So yeah, she's just super level-headed, and I think that she said this multiple times, but she is not going to process what this actually is for a while. And that's okay. That's understandable. So, yeah. Did you glean anything from watching from afar?
Sorry, I have a technical difficulty that I'm trying to figure out how to solve.
That's fun.
There it is. Okay, sorry. I could not figure out. I had another tab playing sounds, and I couldn't figure out which one it was. Okay. Can you ask me your question again?
Yeah, I said, is there anything that you gleaned from afar? You also were at the press conference that she had on Thursday as well.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I mean, I think what you're saying kind of about her mentality and kind of her being such a matter-of-fact person is very true, and she had a really good perspective about moving into retirement. And like you said, she's going to continue to be a very visible person in the community. I think you'll see her around the Thorns. I think you might see her around the WNBA team. I think there's going to be like a Christine Sinclair. She will have her thumb on the continued growth of women's sports in Portland. And you know, I wrote a column about her on Friday. But the one point I think that can't be overemphasized is when we talk about Portland being this global epicenter of women's sports, and we talk about Portland being, you know, obviously a logical location for a WNBA franchise because the Thorns have been so successful. That success is inextricable from what Christine Sinclair has accomplished, and the
direct line.
I mean, she is the, you know, and obviously a ton of credit goes to Merritt Paulson for his investment in the Thorns on the front end and creating the franchise and the level of seriousness that was given to this club and to the league. You know, a lot of women's soccer leagues had come and failed previously. Christine Sinclair had played in them. So, you know, the fact that the NWSL was able to stick and grow, and now you've got clubs that are worth $60+ million, as the Thorns were when they were sold earlier this year. Very impressive. But that is all, in my opinion, because of what Christine Sinclair has meant to the city and what she has accomplished. So that just cannot be emphasized enough, in my opinion. But I will say, you know, the press conference on Thursday, so before her final game, you did see, I thought, some chinks in that emotional armor where she was, you know, you could tell that, she was so uncomfortable doing a press conference in general. That is not her favorite thing, as we've discussed before.
Did you see that clip I posted on Twitter of her before she went up?
From Thursday or from Friday?
From Thursday.
I don't know. Which one was it? I was there, so.
So, you know, we couldn't hear it at the time, but you could hear it over the mic that the moderator had. Christine walked in. And she goes, okay, like, the moderator goes, okay, you know, you're going to get up there. And Christine goes, wait. She goes, oh, just me? Like, she's like,
funny.
No. And then she looks at Jesse filming and she goes, all right, Jesse, come up here with me. And Jesse goes, absolutely not. And then Megan goes, not Megan, sorry. Christine goes and sits down with the players. She doesn't go up to the... I
saw that. I did see that in real time.
Yeah. Doesn't go up to the press to the it's podium, whatever you want to call it, at the press conference. And then I think it was Megan Klingenberg who looked at her and said, "You're supposed to go up there. Like, get up there." And she was like, and she's like, and she's like you. I mean, you couldn't see what Christine was saying at that moment from our camera's vantage point, but yeah. Then like Megan, I think, told her to get up there. She goes, "Get up there, babe." And finally, Christine went up. But like that is how begrudging Christine is. She doesn't. It took multiple people telling her to get her booty up there to finally go sit on the podium.
Yeah, I mean, just that was a funny experience in general. I mean, I didn't know going that it's obviously made total sense, but the entire Thorns roster is there.
Yeah.
To send her off. They had a lot of fun with it. Got a couple of questions in. I thought that made it. I'm of two minds, right? Like there are the curmudgeonly reporters who don't like when players bring their kids to press conferences and all of that, and I understand that perspective completely. But I also I appreciated the good humor that the Thorns brought to that moment.
I thought it was a good balance. It was, it didn't take away. It wasn't so much to the point where you're like, okay, like
Right.
we're not getting to ask anything, whatever.
Right.
I think it brought some good levity to it. And the Hina moment was the sweetest thing of all time. So
it was. Do you want to explain that to our listeners who maybe didn't see the video?
Yeah, Hina Sugita does not speak English fluently. I know she works on it, but she does not speak English fluently. And I've never heard her speak English before. That doesn't mean that she doesn't, but let's put it this way. I wanted to do a story with her a year and a half ago. And yeah, that I got told no, that's not happening. So yeah, Hina got the microphone and said, "Who are you going to miss the most?" And then she said, and Christine kind of like chuckled, and then she was like, "And why is it me?" And the whole place erupted. And then Christine was like, "You know what, Hina? It will be you, because you are an incredible teammate. I'm so happy you came to Portland, like blah, 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 blah." And it was very heartwarming and sweet. And then to follow that up with Hina the next night winning the Supporters Player of the Year, and her reaction to that was so sweet. I did not expect it to be as intense. I didn't expect it to, I wouldn't say it blew up, but I did not expect it to get as much traction as it did on Twitter. But I think the reason why it got as much traction as it did on my Twitter account is because it was such a pure, genuine moment of appreciation from Hina. And I just thought that was really awesome and really cool. And I am so glad that she is back playing. So, yeah.
Would you like to hear about Ann Arbor?
Yes, please.
There is sort of, I don't know how to quite describe it, but there is a feeling. There are days that just feel like college football.
Mm-hmm.
When it is, you know what? Actually, I'm going to pull this up. Jason Quick from the Oregonian,
sunny but crisp.
Right. Jason Quick, when he worked at the Oregonian, years ago, did a story about when the Ducks played at Michigan State and the Beavers played at Michigan on the same day. And he wrote a line that sums it up. And he said, "As summer began its fade into autumn, bringing with it the reminder that sunshine does not always mean warmth. Sunshine does not always mean warmth." And that was what Saturday felt like. It was, as you said, sunny, crisp, cold, but not super cold. Like you would, if you were walking, you might take your jacket off, but you wanted to have your jacket nearby sort of day. People were out. I mean, in Ann Arbor, they're lining up at 7 a.m. to tailgate, a legitimate tailgating scene that overtakes the entire, area surrounding Michigan Stadium. It just felt like college football, and for lack of a better way of describing it. And it was really cool to see and experience because, I've not spent any time in the Big Ten in my life. I've not been to these venues. I've not been to these cities. I've spent a lot of time in Detroit, in the suburbs of Detroit, but never Ann Arbor. So it was cool to get to see kind of the Ducks take their traveling roadshow into a new conference venue. I mean, I know that the Ducks have played in Ann Arbor before. 2007 has obviously been talked about a whole lot over the last week, but was very cool to see it. And also the Ducks were just such prodigious favorites. Like, everybody kind of knew what this was. There was, I have a friend who is a Michigan grad who I saw on Friday night, and he was like, nobody locally is expecting Michigan to win this game. And certainly, they didn't. And I just thought that, one, such a validation of where the Ducks are and this season. Michigan has not been particularly good, but even Michigan's been bad. Even I'll say Michigan's been bad, but the fact that the Ducks really there was no drama to this game. Virtually after the first quarter or so. Tez Johnson's injury obviously kind of cast a pall over the day, and then the fact that you had Ryan Pelham fumble the subsequent pardon me punt return. But the Ducks were just in command of that game, and frankly, it was more lopsided than the 38-17 even really suggested. So, the term business trip gets overused in sports, but I mean, it felt very much like that for the Ducks. And, and then they're going to be in this situation again in 2 more weeks when they go to Madison against another team that, big brand name in college football, but isn't having a great season by any means. And we'll probably have the same conversation, like, oh, is the travel going to catch up with Oregon? What's it going to be like playing in, the cold, all of that. But the one thing about this Ducks team is they have, with the exception of those first 2 weeks, which we have, discussed exhaustively, they have taken the drama out of these games. Like, they have won every game by blowout. And I have continued to kind of wait for the moment where they come out flat or they have a letdown, and I just don't think we're going to get it. I don't think we're going to get it in the regular season.
No, I don't think so either. I think that the next few games are just going to be a situation where they come in, they handle business. Okay, thank you, next. So I mean, I don't think this. I obviously I'm not really concerned about Maryland.
Right.
I'm not concerned about the game at Wisconsin. I don't think Wisconsin is the environment is the environment. I respect that, but at a certain point you got to have the talent.
Yeah.
And then the UW game at Oregon, y'all get ready. That thing, they go run that ish up if they can. Like that team is going to want to demolish the Huskies, demolish them. So, yeah, that should be interesting. But yeah, so I don't think that that's going to be a challenge, which means our next game that really could have that could be a little frisky is the Big Ten championship. So
yeah, and and the Big Ten championship, just essentially, as we discussed, determines is it a bye or is it a home game in the playoff. And as you said, you want that bye. You want that bye bad. What was your reaction to seeing Tez Johnson leave the game and be on the sideline in a sling?
Oh God, gutted. I mean, obviously, I think he's going to be able to get back, especially, I guess one of the quote-unquote nice things about the college football playoffs being so long is that it does give players an opportunity to come back from injuries this late in the season, if you're in it. I mean, this bad boy's going until January 20th. We got 2.5 more weeks of season to go, or 2.5 more months of season to go.
I was thinking about that I was like, what injury could he not, like, almost no matter what this is, as long as it's not requiring like a major surgery, the chances of him being back by conceivably a national championship game seem extremely high. The news has been very positive, and I think what Dan Lanning said on Monday, kind of confirming reports that they expect him back in the coming weeks. It's an injury that's going to be weeks, not months. I thought was extremely encouraging, and my thing with Tez is he's been such a quintessential Duck over these last 2 years, where
an incredible tenure.
He came in with obviously a lot of visibility because of the connection with Bo Nix,
Mm-hmm.
and and the family. And I don't know. I mean, I didn't know what kind of player he was going to be when they brought him in.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't know how good this kid from Troy was going to be, and he has was obviously a part of a 1-2 punch with Troy Franklin last year. I think you could argue that he was Bo's top receiver last year. Troy Franklin just brought a different dimension, obviously, but certainly the number one receiver this year because of his versatility, the situations they can put him in, catches everything, and fast as all get out. So he's been essential. But the fact that he has such a great story, he's been through so much in his life, has overcome a lot and come a long way, sort of both geographically and metaphorically. And the fact that he grew up in Alabama with a love for Oregon football and grew up watching DeAnthony Thomas and LaMichael James, and those are the guys he pretended to be when he was playing Pop Warner football, when from the age of 5 years old. That's true of a lot of people who end up playing for Oregon, right? Like, I mean, Bryce Betcher grew up watching Oregon and dreaming of playing for Oregon, but he grew up in Eugene. To have a guy who from his earliest memories in somewhere as far away as Alabama, in a world that looks nothing like the one he's in now, and in a situation that looks nothing like the one he's in now. I remember last year Bo told me at one point that he didn't think that Tez even understood how far Oregon was from where he grew up as a kid. And so he's here, like, this dream is realized, you know what I mean? Like, he's not just playing for Oregon, he's a star at Oregon. He is among the stars at Oregon. And not only that, but he has this team in position to potentially capture a national championship. The idea that he might not get to be a part of that when we saw him injured was really difficult to digest because of what this means to him and what he has ended up meaning to this team. So to get positive news is just the best thing.
Yeah. I just want to add that Tez is undoubtedly the emotional heartbeat of this team.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it really is. He is whatever he does on the field, very, very important. But I would absolutely say what he does emotionally for this team is the most important thing he does. And he is so good at setting a standard around there, but also being able to express that standard to both his teammates, the media, and fans. And, not all college-age boys are good at that. That's something that, people of that age have to work on. Heck, that's somebody people older men have to work on. You know what I mean? And Tez has done such an incredibly effective job at that. And so I think that is the biggest loss for the Ducks over the next few weeks, is just not having that emotional lightning rod on the field. And but I mean, do I think it's going to be detrimental? No, I think it's going to be okay. But I think just that is where his biggest impact is. It's not a numbers thing.
And I think that one thing I was thinking about on Saturday, and then Dan Lanning ended up making this point as well, to the point of the depth that this team has. They lost Jordan Birch going into the Ohio State game.
Yep.
And we were all like, oh my God, that just seals it. Like that. Can they overcome the absence of one of the most disruptive defensive players in the country? The answer ends up being yes. So, I think Oregon has the depth and the talent at receiver, especially given the way the schedule lines up, that, they have 3 games over these next 4 weeks, and then, and then a Big Ten championship game, for him to either get healthy or for them to, really kind of take advantage of the way the schedule falls, and not miss him as much as they might have earlier in the season. One thing that I did think was an important takeaway from Saturday ended up being my column, so obviously I thought it was important. But the opportunity that Tez's absence created for others, notably Traeshon Holden, who, has not been in the mix since the Ohio State game. Since he made some big catches against the Buckeyes, ends up spitting in the face of a defender against Ohio State. One of those real low points for a team, for the sport. And, not, it's not LeGarrette Blount. Like it's not punching an opponent, but it is in my opinion, that is as disrespectful and maybe even more disrespectful than punching a guy.
Yeah.
And so what happens? He doesn't play against Purdue. He only gets 2 catches the next week against Illinois. Justice Lowe comes onto the scene, establishes himself as a real threat in the receiving corps. Where does Traeshon Holden fit in? Tez Johnson goes down. All of a sudden, he has the game of his life: 6 catches, 149 yards. And I don't want to give the impression that that having a good game excuses the bad behavior of 3 weeks earlier. It doesn't, right? Like the act still stands on its own.
Yes.
But I do believe in second chances. I think there needs to be a path back to forgiveness. And what I liked about what happened on Saturday and what made me appreciate Traeshon Holden's big game was the fact it gave us an opportunity to talk more about the incident and the way he had responded to the incident.
Yes.
So Dylan Gabriel, who, you talk about like emotional heartbeats and like being great leaders. Yep. and being composed and being able to convey like the right message, both internally and externally. Dylan Gabriel's an extremely impressive young man. By the way, how old am I? Impressive young man. But he is. And the way that he was able to sort of explain Traeshon Holden's approach over these last few weeks, I thought was really illuminating, where he talked about, the leadership that he's seen from him. It's not just taking accountability for the act, which he has done. He knows he messed up, but the way he has continued to work and represent himself, in practices, in the weight room, traveling with the team. I thought it was important for kind of the whole Traeshon Holden story and the arc of that moment to have the opportunity for Dylan to get to tell sort of the aftermath, like what has happened since. And that was great. We haven't heard from Traeshon Holden, I don't think he's spoken this week. He has, at least up until Saturday, had not spoken to reporters. And he hasn't spoken yet. So, I would have loved to have heard from him on Saturday night. I thought that would have been a great moment to hear from him. But, those are chaotic events, and, teams trying to get out. The team's trying to get out of there and get home. So I get it. But,
I don't think we're going to hear from him for a little bit.
One of the issues I have with college football, right, or college sports is,
I know what you're going to say.
Well, I was just going to say, like, in the NBA, there's just no getting around it. You know what I mean?
Nope.
Like, in pro sports, like the accountability is you will sit up there and you'll answer, the tough questions. And I think it's better for the player. I think it's better for everybody. I think it would be better. And maybe Traeshon Holden doesn't need to do it now because Dylan Gabriel did such a good job and he's played well, and it's sort of like, sort of almost has addressed the situation. But I would still like to hear from Traeshon Holden. I'd like to hear what he has learned and taken away from this, this experience. He wrote a letter that was a public letter that I thought was very well done and addressed it. But it would be it does bother me that in college sports, or there is a sense of, I think I'm not trying that. Well, now that we're kind of going down this road, I'm not trying to like blast Oregon specifically. This is not a specific like Oregon is doing something wrong.
Yeah.
But I do think that like in college sports, programs tend to hide behind the idea of we're looking out for the player, right? Because it's easier for them if they don't have to make Traeshon available. It's easier if they don't like run the risk of something going wrong in that situation. But you can sort of hide behind the idea. And I haven't had these conversations with Oregon. This is very much an abstract point I'm making, not about the Ducks and the way they've handled this. But
SIDs, don't come after us.
Well, it's just not a conversation I've had with them, so I don't want to make it seem like I'm being critical of the people there who are working hard. But the idea,
for those who don't know, sports information directors, they're kind of like the go-between between the media and the team. Continue.
Thank you. I think I've made my point. I've already made my point. The idea that a
Yeah.
player that like, you can say, oh, we don't want to put him in a position that could be bad for him, but really you don't want to put him in a position that could be bad for you. So you can hide behind that. And whereas like that would just not ever fly in professional sports, but college sports have become professional sports. And I might be an Oregon fan who has said, I love watching Traeshon Holden play football. I'm going to donate $5,000, to NIL earmarked for Traeshon Holden because I think he's awesome. And it's like, so the accountability piece has changed, I think, in this era too, because it has become so much more like professional sports.
Well, it's the same situation as when, kids get into a program their freshman year and coaches say freshmen are off limits. Yeah. Like, those kids have been talking to the media, most of them, for 5-6 years. And now all of a sudden they can't speak because they're 18 years old? Like, I don't understand. What happens between the summer that they get there and getting on campus that makes them unable to do interviews? So, this is what college sports does, unfortunately. And like you said, sometimes I think it's to its detriment, especially in a situation like this where I think that it could do a lot of good. The one thing that I really, my biggest takeaway from Traeshon Holden actually came the game before.
Okay.
Because Justice Lowe scores his touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
And the number one thing I saw, because you didn't see it on the broadcast. Mm-hmm. I only saw it because I looked back through our footage. Mm-hmm. The number one thing I saw was not Justice Lowe scoring his first touchdown for Oregon. It was Traeshon Holden jumping up and down all over the field, thrilled for Justice Lowe, the guy who took his starting spot. Mm-hmm. So thrilled that Justice scored a touchdown. And I thought that was an incredible example of the character he could have. And because in that situation, he doesn't have to do that. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have to. He could just say, hey, good job, man. But no, he was jumping up and down excited. Yeah. And that told me a lot about the place that he was at mentally and what he was working on. So the fact that karma came around and this happened this way, I think is I think that's a sign of putting in the work. It is. It's a sign of putting in the work and getting to this spot. Because if he did not put in the work, he might not have been out on that field so much on Saturday, but he did. And then he got the opportunity. So, I think that this is a real, it's very hard in life to have a real distinct moment where you have to choose your character and what your life looks like from here on out. And Traeshon got served that, not only just generally as a moment in his life, but he got served that, as Dylan Gabriel said, in 4K on a national platform. And Traeshon had choices he had to make from there. And so far, he has made the right ones. So that is very cool to see.
Before we get out of here, Brenna, I want to know your opinion. Will the Beavers have a new starting quarterback on Saturday against San Jose State?
I don't think so.
Really?
I don't think so.
So, the Beavers made a change in the second quarter at Cal. Mm-hmm. They moved Giovanni McCoy to the position of bench and elevated Ben Goldbranson. See, I knew it'd come back. The education you gave me back in like week before week 1. See, no more Ben Goldbranson. Ben Goldbranson came in. Wasn't much better. I mean, I don't think quarterback is the Beavers' only issue. But the Beavers have lost 3 straight. The season has gone completely sideways. Mm-hmm. Giovanni McCoy was not setting the world on fire. He had moments. Don't get me wrong. He had real moments.
Yeah.
But he hasn't been a program changer at quarterback. And Trent Bray has basically said they're going back to square one at quarterback and evaluating all 3 guys. Obviously, Giovanni, Goldbranson, and Jabari Johnson, the Missouri transfer, who we have seen a little bit of, but we've not seen for sustained stretches. Mm-hmm. I don't see the argument to keep if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if it's broke, Brenna, change something. And so I'm interested to see what direction Trent Bray goes, because it is pretty clear that what the Beavers have been doing is not working against more quality opponents. San Jose State is solid. That is a very much an improved team. I'd be surprised if Giovanni McCoy is the starter on Saturday, just because you've got to do something. And I think that you have that was such a close battle all the way through the fall anyway, that it's like, don't you want to see what one of these other guys looks like? Or even if it's not, okay, fine, let's give Jabari a chance. And there's a few factors here, and then we're gonna get out of here. I'm gonna try not to dwell too much on this.
Not gonna belabor it.
Ben Gulbranson probably is the steady Eddie. He can come in. He will probably give you your best chance to hang in the game and maybe win. Like, that's probably like your need to win this week choice. But there's also the like what if Jabari Johnson has got something? Don't you need to find out? Because you're also in a situation where everybody's a free agent every year all the time. And so these guys, Ben Gulbranson is going to be, is going to be out into the real world after this season. I think he's finally eligibility to out. But, Giovanni McCoy might be looking for a new situation unless they feel good enough about bringing him back and he wants to come back. Jabari Johnson could be looking for a new situation unless you give him a reason to stay. So if you think Jabari Johnson could be the guy next year, don't you almost have to give him a shot to be the guy this year? Or, and I don't know, or do you risk him playing so well that he can go into the portal and go somewhere else too, that he views to be greener pastures? Or do you just try to beat San Jose State?
I think you just have to go with whoever is the best option against San Jose State. If you start playing the and if but game, it's you just can't do it. But I do see your point about it for sure with Jabari. Like, do you let him play and then all of a sudden, oh wow, he's got a 4-game sample size, that's amazing or something, you know? But I also think that right now, I mean, this team just needs to get bowl eligible. Even though, as we've discussed, we're not a fan of bowl games, I am a fan of winning seasons. So
it's something to hang the hat on.
Yeah. And after everything that went down in the program over the last year, having a winning season is A-okay, I think, in both of our books. That is an accomplishment for this team. So I think they just need to go out there and put whoever is going to be best and call it good. I do not think it is Ben Gulbranson. I could see a case for just throwing Jabari out there and seeing what happens. But that's why I think you kind of go with Giovanni. Because who has gotten you to... I know that the last few weeks have not been fantastic for him. But by the way, it's not like they could have easily won that UNLV game.
They could have, right? And they came back, and it was very exciting. They also put themselves in a position to lose.
They did.
And they also, for as easily as they could have beaten UNLV, they could have lost to Colorado State. And so, I mean, that's just sort of, the classic them's the breaks. It's football. Yeah. I would also say, though, to your point about getting bowl eligible, which I do think matters to this program and matters to this team, I would view San Jose State as a must win. Because if you don't beat San Jose State, you would have to beat 2 of Washington State, Air Force, and Boise State. I mean, the Cougs at home, that could be a good game. That could be a fun game. But the Cougs are currently the number 20 team in the country, and the Beavers are not. So I would have a lot of confidence in the Cougars coming in to restart and getting a W. So that makes Saturday a must win if you want to get to bowl eligibility and give your fan base a reason to travel all the way to Shreveport in December.
Who doesn't want to go to Shreveport in December?
I'd like to go to Shreveport. Shreveport, not just a great place and with a casino town, but also the title of a great song by Turnpike Troubadours.
Well, that's all you need. That's all you need.
For Brenna Greene, I'm Bill Oram. Thank you so much for listening to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. Continue to read and support our work on Oregon Live. Watch Brenna on KOIN 6 and Portland CW after the Beavers game on Saturday. We'll be back next week with more.
It actually won't be me Saturday, but that's okay.
A twist!
A twist.
Watch her on KOIN, though. You're still on KOIN, right?
I am still on KOIN.
Watch her on KOIN.
Portland CW.
Watch her on KOIN 6 and Portland CW. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with more exciting conversation about the Ducks, Beavers, Trailblazers, and the entire wide world of Oregonian sports.